Hey guys, sorry I have kept you waiting for so long, but I have had a baby and just been experiencing motherhood. But today in our stories we're going to be experiencing Soviet Russia in some spooky stories, so let's just get into them. I lived in the northern part of Russia for around 10 years. And I've encountered a lot of weird stuff there. I'll start with some context. B13, Dad and Mum break up because Dad is abusive. Mum loses court case and Dad gains custody. After divorce, Dad changes and starts seeing weirdos for life advice. Some guy tells him that he needs to cut himself from society to awaken his third eye or some shit. So we move from northern Russia to a rural town. A town so secluded it didn't have a name. Life as you'd expect was shit and boring. The schools there don't even teach English. The official language, or even basic sciences. The locals are cool though. So on to the paranormal stuff. I'll start off with the creepiest one. I've personally never encountered it. In fact, I've only known 3 people who claim they have. But the whole of the town is scared of it. We call it the Flat Man. It's said to appear in some of the most rural areas of the region. The best way I could describe it is to compare it to a living shadow, but it's more like a void in the shape of a human on the floor. Its shape cannot appear on trees or buildings, only the ground. Apparently the Flat Man has made entire tribes of people disappear. In 1989, a group of around 10 people went to hunt it. 2 months later, clothing started to wash up in the local river. It was their clothing. Apart from being wet, the clothing wasn't damaged. The next night, screaming could be heard outside of the town. Another time, some guy was hunting deer. He spotted a deer, but it seemed to have its legs stuck in something. When he got closer, he could see the Flat Man holding the deer's leg. Then it started making a pulling motion. You know what happens when something is pulled through a tiny hole? Well, that's basically what happened to the deer. Not a trace of the deer left. Hunter instantly runs as far away as he can. My next story. I have a classmate. Let's call him Igor. Igor's dad has encountered the Flat Man at one point. Be 1992. He works for a small wood cutting business. Patches of forest are valuable in the region, so if your boss tells you to go, you can't object. So he's at the spot and he comes across uprooted trees in the shape of a spiral. He tries to get the fuck out, but keeps coming back at the spiral. Notices that the other trees are still bending. Starts feeling a weird sensation. His own body is swayed towards the spiral. The pull gets so strong that he has to push himself off the trees to move. Then suddenly, all the uprooted trees get sucked up into the ground. The force of the pull is so strong it breaks one of his arms. He looks over and there's a massive fucking hole where the spiral was. In the hole, he can make out the Flat Man. He starts moving in a swimming motion. See, the Flat Man is called Flat Man instead of like Shadow Man because he doesn't move like one. When you turn, your shadow changes shape to reflect that. But the Flat Man can't do that. He can't move his arms through his chest. So he moves in this weird swimming motion. Igor's dad starts running and Flat Man gives chase. The Flat Man can fuck with shadows. Every time a shadow of a tree gets in his way, he kind of swats it away, and the entire tree breaks. He makes it to his car and manages to lose it. Me and a few friends actually managed to stumble into the crater, and sure enough, it was in the shape of a spiral. It was overgrown, and the entire time we were near it, everything felt floaty. And we couldn't feel smell or taste. And the last guy I know of that encountered the Flat Man died in 2006. But someone told his story. Apparently he was a hermit and lived away from the town. One day he noticed the land had risen slightly and messed with the foundation of this house. It keeps rising, so he gets a guy to take a look at it. Dude sees it and tells him to leave immediately. Hermit is stuck up, so he stays. He awakes to half of his house missing and a giant pillar in the sky. Some locals saw the pillar in the sky. A few of the brave ones go to check it out. They find the guy. He's out cold. Guy's legs are missing. Said his legs were so cleanly cut, they weren't even bleeding. They get the guy and drive away. A few minutes later, pillar goes back down. Hermit wakes up. Says the flat man grabbed the shadow of his legs and just took them off before he passed out. Never went to the location because he genuinely lived in a scary as fuck place full of bears and wolves. The flat man is one of the craziest ones by far. Nomads cover their ears if you bring them up, or straight up start a fight with you. Some of the more integrated nomads tell of tales of how ancient tribes tried their hardest to eradicate it and went missing. He's the only thing that no one dares to fuck with. People don't like talking about him. This next story happened whenever I was 15, 2 years after moving in. Me and Dad are having breakfast and get a knock at the door. I open it. A guy is standing there and looks almost identical to the picture. Tips his hat and introduces himself as Ivan Anovich, basically the John Smith of Russia. This happened in 2009, so the guy is very out of place. My dad, being the understanding gentleman that he is, tells him, "What do you fucking want?" Instantly gets this sinking feeling in my stomach. Dad's speech becomes 10 times more polite. Ivan says that he is the governmental representative of the town. He's responsible for tax collection, solving judicial problems, and keeping the peace. Starts telling us how the town works. I think to myself, I know this stuff. He instantly stops talking and excuses himself. Ivan leaves and we both sit there dumbfounded for a bit. Later on, me and Dad are bringing firewood back home and visit a market. While we were there, Ivan taps my dad's shoulder. Everybody instantly quiets down. Ivan and Dad start talking. From what I could tell, my dad did some dumb shit and a few town folks were mad. My dad instantly starts spurging out. Then he shuts up. A local comes by and defends my dad. Ivan then says, "If you continue your unacceptable behaviour, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" Then I get the sudden urge to nod. Everyone around Ivan, even people who weren't looking at him, nodded. Ivan goes around a corner, and he's just fucking gone. Ivan does so much creepy shit, on many occasions. I've seen him just appear out of dark alleyways or rooms. Anyone who fucks with Ivan just disappears. Anytime I talk to Ivan, it's like half the shit I say I don't even think about. I've heard a story that some nomad got drunk and started stabbing random people in the town. So Ivan just came into the bar and the guy just shuts down and dies. Everyone feels the urge to leave, and when it stops, they instantly come back. Both Ivan and the nomad are gone. I remember I once got drunk and ended up sleeping in some guy's property. Rumours about me started spreading around the community. It's evening and I'm reading a book. Enjoying your read? Then fucking Ivan comes out of the darkness. It scares the shit out of me. But a soothing sensation quickly kicks in. Ivan starts to literally interrogate me. Asks really personal questions about my life and family. I answer with as much detail as possible, even though I didn't want to. Ivan eventually concludes this chat, walks into the darkness, and just disappears. Ivan's creepy ass face and voice still gives me the shivers. I think I need to give a bit of backstory. First, I think I should explain more about the nomads. The nomads are basically tribes of nomadic horsemen that split off from the main rural societies. Their language is very hard to understand, but some nomads have integrated into Russian society and translate for us. They believe some sort of pagan religion. From what I've been told, they believe in 5 gods. The gods are named after cardinal directions. North, Kahid, god of wind and everything to do with the cold. South, Amned, god of fertility and nature. East, Zahun, god of the hunt and the trickster. West, Varun, god of guns and death. Tengri is taken from Tengriism and is basically the Allfather. There's also Khazar, which I'll be telling a story about. Be me, 2012. Dad goes out for a drink and doesn't come back. People start telling me to go look for him. This isn't the first time this has happened, so I just chilled. 2 weeks go by. A few locals find my dad's body. They request I do a proper burial. I couldn't be bothered, so I just tell them to put him 6 feet under. Next day I'm out gathering firewood, and between the trees I see a pair of eyes staring at me. I try to get closer, but when I blink it disappears. Then when walking back home, I see it again on a rock. I can make out its shape. Long skinny legs, small body, and big shiny eyes. As soon as I saw it, I knew it was the Khazar. In legend, it's basically supposed to be an omen from the gods. If you somehow offended one of the gods, Khazar starts appearing to you. I understood that I had offended some god by not burying my father. I've lived there long enough to know not to fuck with the paranormal. So the next day, I give my father a proper Tengri burial. I stopped seeing the Khazar after that, but the Khazar appears a lot to hunters. Most hunters heed the warning, and either avoid the area, or bring back their catch. There were a few stuck-ups though. One guy didn't heed the warning, and had a bear break into his home and he got killed. Then someone was found impaled on a deer's horn. Another was found frozen in a lake. A hunter's gun once exploded when he shot and mutilated himself. And a few people were crushed by their own roof caving in on them from snow build-up. All of these people had said about being visited by the Khazar. The guy who got killed by a bear had told close friends that the Khazar's eyes become brighter over time. For him, the eyes were bright enough to illuminate his whole house. I had a friend who got quite unlucky with the Khazar. Let's call him Vlad. Vlad loves to seclude himself in the wilderness, and when he had free time, he would always go up north to camp. One day Vlad goes camping. Nothing goes wrong. But when he's coming back to the town, he starts seeing the Khazar. My friend didn't kill any animal, nor did he do anything that would piss off the gods. So he assumed that the area he was in was off limits. But the Khazar doesn't go away. In fact, he starts seeing wolves stalking him from the bush. One day while Vlad is going to work, a pack of wolves attack him. One of them latches onto his arm and starts tearing into it. He manages to hurt the wolf, and that gives him enough time to escape to safety. After that, the wolves leave him alone. For months, Vlad pondered what he could have done, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Then one of the locals said he found Vlad's campsite, and sitting there was a single fucking beer can. Another story I have was a time when I didn't have much money, and a lot of shit breaks down before winter. If you know anything about northeastern Russia, you know that the winters are hellish. So I need money, quick. There's a meat vendor that'll pay good for bison. The vendor gets a party together and we go out hunting. The party consists of me, Igor, Vlad, Andrei, Michael, and another 5 people. But they're irrelevant since we split into 2 groups. Our group goes to a place around 50 kilometers from our nearest town. We're deep in a forest tracking some bison prints. Suddenly, hear a low groan. As soon as it stops, the wind picks up and it starts snowing. Snow in September isn't the weirdest thing I hear. But it's not common. As time goes on, wind and snowfall become stronger. Vision is so obscured you can only see around 50 meters in front of you. It's starting to get late, so we start looking for a place to camp. We come up to this slope, which has a great view of the area. Igor and Andrew stay to set up the camp, and the rest of us go to gather wood. 5 minutes in, we hear Igor shout, "Holy shit." Everyone comes back and Igor is pointing at the horizon. I don't know if Igor had eagle vision, but we can't make out shit. So we tell Igor there's nothing there, and continue with our day and go to sleep. Michael wakes me up at around 6 a.m. "Dude, wake the fuck up!" I get out of my tent, and there's a fucking giant in the horizon. It was humanoid, but it was crooked, skinny as hell, and the arms didn't quite match. It had trees and shit growing on it. 2 of them grew in the shape of horns. I couldn't make out its features due to fog, and it made zero fucking noise. The only reason Michael woke up was because hundreds of birds were perched up and flying around it. All of us get the fuck out and never come back. Got chewed out by our employer and had to do shitty janitor jobs. Didn't care though, because I'm not fucking with whatever that thing was. Okay, so on the outskirts of our town, there's a community of 5 houses. In one of these homes lives a guy. We'll just call him Can. He has hundreds of stories. Some so out there that I couldn't believe them. He's very awkward to be around, because all he talks about is nomad culture, hunting and shepherding. So here's a story that involved him. It's 2014. Andrew and Vlad have jobs in the local police. They get an assignment to check up on a patch of land that someone wants to cultivate. It sounds like a boring job, so they invite me and Andrew to camp with them. On the way, we see a lot of nomad tribes moving around. When we stop by the community, we ask about the tribes. They tell us that they're moving from some sort of summer solstice celebration. Before we leave, they insist we take Can with us. It was plain obvious that they just wanted to get rid of him for a few days. Begrudgingly, we took him with us. The whole car ride was very awkward and boring. We finally got our spot, which was around 10 kilometers from the town. We set up and start grilling. It's a really fun evening. Even Can got a bit laxed. Everyone goes to sleep at around 12. I wake up at 2 a.m. to fucking Can throat singing at the top of his lungs. We were pretty drunk and ticked off, so we start telling Can to shut the fuck up. While we were arguing, Michael just fucking snaps and starts screaming at Can. The argument goes on for 2 hours. After everything calms down, we decide to pack up and finish up here. Problem is, we're nowhere near our camp. It's like we got moved to some random location. There's a thick fog that obscures everything 5 meters away. Can tells us that we royally fucked up. Tells us that we need fire right now. Everyone scrambles for their lighters. Can tells everyone to follow him. We think about it for a second, but realise it's probably better to follow the 2-meter tall nomad than stay out here. Can starts leading us. While walking, Can is singing some nomad song, and we hear a bell ringing. As soon as we hear it, we're all lying face down on the floor. Then hear chirp and start throwing up water. Can says, "It started. Listen to everything I've got to say. Make sure to check your back if you hear weird noises." As soon as he finishes the sentence, there's a child's giggle and all of our clothes are tied together. We hear a loud pop and our fire sources become 10 times brighter. Can tells us to carry on. In the fog, there are silhouettes of 4 figures watching us. First one is just some big dude with a crown. Second one is also huge. His knees are bent backwards and he has deer horns. Third has a woman's proportions and has a goat's horns. Fourth looks like a normal dude, with a gun. We can hear a chorus of laughter and cheering coming from all around us. Can asks Vlad if he's checked his back. We all turn around. There's this dried up, tall person, basically a fucking skeleton behind Vlad. It gets scared away by the fire and retreats into the fog. There's multiple of them, and they keep trying to jump at us. Can calls them failures. We come across a rabbit. Can instantly grabs it and kills it. He raises the rabbit into the air and says something in his language. We can hear a bit of booing and groaning coming from around us. Then a deer's silhouette comes next to the other silhouettes. The one with the deer horn grabs it by the head and snaps its neck. It throws the deers to Khan's legs. Khan tells us to bow down and repeat after him. We do it. The silhouettes disappear and the fog starts to clear up. We find our campsite a few hundred meters away. Khan takes the deer and the rabbit with him. We come back to the station. Andrew and Vlad are discussing what to say to their report. Khan tells him to write out the report as if everything was normal, but to recommend him for hire in the field. So that's what they do, and Khan works and lives over there from now on. These stories are based on tales told by an Anon's grandpa who worked as a police inspector in the Soviet Union and 90s Russia. These stories are basically posts made by an Anon on one of the Russian image boards many years ago. So gentlemen, I've managed to find a cable for my cheap photo camera, and that means that this is time for some exciting tales. As I already said, my late grandpa served in the police in the Soviet Union up until the end of the 1990s. To be more precise, he was an inspector in the Seoul police station in a small town near Moscow. He was a very tight-lipped, solemn man, but when you asked him about his work, he usually became more talkative. In my opinion, work was the only thing he loved in his life. So when I was younger, I was interested in the paranormal stuff even back then. I spent a lot of evenings in his kitchen, inquiring about the most interesting cases of his career. After my grandfather died, I found a thick notebook that he apparently used as a diary of sorts that he kept in his personal cabinet. In that diary there was a collection of his most, let's say, curious cases. I've managed to get this diary from my grandma a few times, and while reading it, I was always thinking about my grandpa as some sort of mathematician. No literature style, no personal opinions. Only confirmed cold facts, such as place where corpse was found, a criminologist evaluation, suspects and stuff like that. A few theories and a couple of notes. I think he kept working on these cases in his free time, trying to solve these riddles. Most of his notes correlates with stories he told me when I was a child, but there were also a few that I had never heard about. In case you suddenly enjoy some of these stories, I might even pay a visit to my grandma and ask her to let me flip through a few pages of that diary, read up on some cases I'm not familiar with, and make a few photos of the former scene of crimes. Later we can even try to guess what happened there. As I said, I wanted to write some sort of book about all those cases, so I will provide you with some photos that I already got with some additional notes. But don't expect all of my photos to be of exact crime scenes, for obvious reasons. In some cases I was too chicken to enter particular houses, because neighbourhoods there, as the town in general, are full of certain criminal elements, and if you enter some shitty hostel full of ex-cons and drug addicts, you might simply never leave it. Also, some places got intercoms these days. I will also add that there will be no colourful descriptions of monsters and stuff like that. Many cases of serious mystical undertones, but with some imagination, you probably can explain them within a framework of habitual phenomena. But I can promise you a bit of noir, dismemberment, and romantic of piss-stained staircases in apartment complexes. Oh yes, I would also ask you not to get all booty blasted about quality of my photos. I'm no photographer, and instead of proper camera, I got this digital piece of shit. Well, let's start. The first case. The first case I want to tell you about happened in 1993. And it is particularly interesting because no one managed to explain what happened there. I will add a few photos to this post. First has an apartment complex where it happened. Second, an exact place where a body was found. Second stairwell, between the 3rd and 4th floors, if you absolutely must know. So around 10 o'clock in the evening, an investigation operative group was called in on report about a discovery of a corpse. This is what they saw on that staircase. A human body leaking a shitload of blood. Head separated from torso and lying not far away. Lacerations look as if someone chewed him. According to my grandpa, his clothes, that consisted of training pants, sweater and slippers, torn in a dozen places. Also some smaller injuries on his naked skin. It was instantly obvious that this corpse was fresh, which was confirmed by criminologists on the scene. Rigor mortis hadn't set in yet, which indicated that less than 2 hours passed since the moment of death. This was confirmed later, during the investigation of the victim's inconsolable widow, who lived on the 4th floor, and whose door was like 3 meters from the body. By the way, she was the one who actually found and reported the corpse. The widow was clearly an alcoholic, and already had time to get wasted, but nonetheless she did provide some information. Her husband left the flat at around 9:30 in the evening to take out some garbage. When 15 minutes passed, she started to worry that he decided to stop and chat with his drinking buddies, who usually sat near the entrance of the apartment complex, drinking. The windows of their flat provided no overview of the yard outside. If I recall correctly, she decided to go downstairs herself to look for him, but the moment she left her flat, she saw a disfigured body of her husband in a pool of blood. She failed to provide any more details during the later questionings. Now for the interesting part. Interrogations of other inhabitants of the complex provided literally no additional information. Not a single one of them heard any ruckus, screams, or sound of fighting. Nothing. And that is considering the shitty non-soundproof doors people had back then. There was also indeed a bunch of drunkards sitting on a porch downstairs. According to them, they were hanging out there since around 8 in the evening, and in all that time only one old lady who lived on the 1st floor and a single mother who lived on the 2nd entered the complex. Both of them also heard and saw nothing. During that time, not a single person left the complex. My grandfather almost instantly suspected some sort of large dog. What else could dismember a person in such a manner in the middle of civilization? Later investigations revealed that there were 2 dog owners in that complex, but their dogs were not nearly big enough to inflict such wounds, which was also later confirmed by the coroner. The head was indeed separated from the body, as if with the teeth of a large animal. His spine was literally grinded in places. Also, one of his legs had very clear markings of jaws. According to the coroner, it looked very deliberate, as if left there intentionally. Every single tooth of both lower and upper jaw left a clean mark, which almost never happens in normal coroner's practice. Jaws indeed were similar to a dog's, but a really big one, and there were 48 of those teeth, while normal dogs only have 42. Now, a couple of my own comments. A large dog is indeed capable to separate a grown man's head from his body in 15 to 20 minutes. I can confirm this as an owner of a large dog. No, my dog didn't kill anyone, but can chew through a large bone in around 10 minutes. But there would be a fuckload of noise and shouts. But how could no one notice a huge ownerless dog entering and exiting the apartment complex? Such animals tend to be remembered. Another strange thing is that blood was only found near the body. There was no blood on the stairs themselves, neither above nor below, as if he was first put on the floor and then got his head calmly chewed off in silence. My dog attacked a homeless dog once, and there was a lot of blood. It was dripping from his jaws and chest all the way home. And let me remind you that a human has much more blood than a dog. Nothing like that here. Everything is crispy clean. So we have something big that appeared on the staircase between the floors, silently chewed a grown man's head off, left a dozen injuries on his body without any signs of resistance, and then just disappeared. Officially, the case was explained by a wild dog attack and closed the fuck down. Not before informing the local dog catchers that they should do their work better in the future. Now for a story from my childhood. This story also happened around 93, in that same small town near Moscow. I tried and failed to Google anything about it, and I've never heard anyone discussing it here in this town, so I guess there's no reason to give away the name. My gramps worked in the local police, and I asked him about that case many times, so I guess I didn't completely imagine it, even though I was like 4 years old back then, and my memories are a bit foggy. Back then, young women started to disappear in our town. Absolutely normal girls. Not some criminal's girlfriend or anything, according to my grandpa. In a single month, 6 of them disappeared in a single month, and then the 7th was lost. Her father was a trainer in the local boxing club, popular with both sportsmen and local thugs. From a whole bunch of his clients and friends who were willing to help him, he created some sort of militia patrol aimed at looking for his daughter and preventing similar abductions in the future. This militia started to stroll around the neighbourhood in small groups, and one night I woke up from some loud noises from outside. I ran to my window and saw my mother and father standing there, looking at a bunch of guys who were trying to widen some tiny cellar window that was right under mine, first floor, with sledgehammers. Now for some facts from my gramps. Guys from one of those patrols saw 3 guys carrying something big towards that cellar. They immediately ran after them, but those 3 guys had managed to close the heavy steel cellar door before they were caught. Later I learned that they also built a barricade from some garbage lying inside, when they realised that the guys from the militia are not joking. So the militia guys called all the others and broke into the basement through that window, where they found those 3 crazy fuckos armed with knives and girls' already dismembered bodies. I know now that there was also a handwritten book in an unknown language. It was later apparently lost or stolen right from the evidence box. A hacksaw for metal and a dog's skull. Walls and floors were covered in some symbols written in chalk, which were mostly destroyed under the feet of 24 boxers who entered that basement. But nothing of value was lost, I guess. By the time cops arrived, those 3 guys were already heavily beaten by the boxers. 2 of them got crippled for life. 1 actually died. Few boxers received some superficial cuts. Interrogation by raging father gave no results. Same as latter interrogations by police. Many traces of blood were found in that basement though, from different people and from a long period of time. As you can expect, no bodies were found, even though search parties combed through every neighbourhood and nearby forest. The 2 survivors kept their silence. Come to think of it, those guys were some sort of fucked in the head neat necromancy cosplayers or something, and even they managed to hide those bodies very well. Imagine what smarter person with no mental issues could do. Now for the second case from my grandfather. I just stumbled upon those photos, so I guess I'll tell you about them. I have to warn you that some people might not find it too scary, but this case always captivated me. There's something about it. Also, when I once saw some tiny lights in the woods at night, I figuratively shat my pants. It will be longer than the first one, but do prepare yourselves, for I have no fucking idea how long the third one will be either. It happened in the winter of '95. One evening, around 8 o'clock, a strange visitor came to the local police station, a priest of the local church, which, by the way, happens to be in the middle of the fucking nowhere. He came to report threats he has been receiving for some time now. The priest brought a bunch of notes with him, which were written on torn notebook pages in crooked block letters. They were written with a bunch of mistakes. That desk cop on duty that night had a field day with it, but he didn't last for long. According to the priest, he regularly received those notes in his mailbox. First every 3 days. Later, every day, which was the reason he decided to finally report them. After being asked if he wanted to add something else to his report, he hesitantly added that he started to hear the sound of slaps in his apartment, as if someone was slapping linoleum in his corridor and kitchen with bare hands. When asked if he actually checked what it was, he answered that he was too scared to leave his room, and just prayed to God, hoping for his protection. He was clearly worried that people would think that he's just insane, and people at the station indeed thought so, but his report was officially accepted nonetheless. It was a busy period for the police, and since the priest didn't look well in the head, the case and those notes were forgotten for a time. Around a week later, an investigation operative group gets a call. In the forest, around 200 to 250 metres deep, on the glade you can see on the first photo, a body was found. And not just some body, but, as you've probably guessed, the body of that very priest. The state of that corpse was pretty fucking terrible. Almost all of the muscle tissue on his hands and legs were missing. The body was in rigor mortis and had blemishes all over. Facial features were distorted by the rot. He was only recognised so quickly thanks to his cross, which was the only element of clothes on him. Long hair and beard. Later it was concluded that he died 7 or 8 days before the discovery. Additionally, his body clearly was kept indoors for some time, since it wouldn't have rotten so much in the winter frost. It was confirmed by the elderly guy who found the body, since he used to walk with his dog every day on the same route in the forest, and only discovered the body that morning. Also, which was especially bizarre, many prints that were found around that body looked like the prints of human hands. They didn't look like footprints. They were handprints. It was just fucking ridiculous at that point. Quoting my grandfather, there was a trail of such prints leading around the forest. Strangely enough, not on the cleared trail, but around it, in the snowdrifts. There was no evidence of body being dragged. All the other prints belonged to that elderly guy and the cops. Previous night, there was a serious snowfall, which would have covered the tracks. So body clearly wasn't there for long, and it clearly didn't happen to appear there by itself. Questionings of the elderly guy, residents of the nearby houses, and guards of a garage cooperative close by didn't clarify much, though the elderly guy kept nagging about finding corpses of animals on that glade. Dogs, cats, rats, crows and such. He reported that to the police many times, but nothing was done about it. And he had to bury animals himself. He also just had to share this theory about Satanists with the investigators. The place itself was far away from anything. The closest houses were like 600 to 700 metres away. Same as that garage cooperative. No cars stopped nearby. No mysterious people were seen there. Not even ordinary people with big bag or parcel. Literally fuck all. And that's when someone remembered about the notes. Earlier notes were rather simplistic. Basically threats like, reject your faith or we will kill you. But those that came later were a bit more interesting. Take off your cross or you will feed the hungry one with yourself. My grandfather quoted this from memory. There was more, but he didn't recall what those were about, sadly. All of them had a bunch of mistakes, as I already stated. No handwriting expertise was done, to my knowledge. But those notes were quickly given away to experts in order to check for fingerprints, while investigators decided to visit the priest's flat. The door wasn't closed, though there was no signs of forced entry. Remembering priest's words about slaps on the floor, linoleum in his corridor and kitchen was checked, without much hope for fingerprints. But this was a sudden success. A few clear handprints. Huge fingers certainly were not the priest's. Fingers looked like they belonged to some hammer or smith, according to my grandfather. Other than that, everything in his flat looked in order. All the obvious valuables, like the icons, were still there. But there was no way to know for sure, since that priest lived alone and had no relatives, being an orphan. In short, fingerprints in the notes were identical to those on the floor. But neither the local police station nor the bigger regional archive had those prints in their databases. Meanwhile, coroner reports stated that the muscle in his hands and legs weren't eaten by the animals, but neatly removed with surgical accuracy using either a scalpel or a small and very sharp knife. No additional wounds were found on his body. No traces of known poisons were found either. Police had to start questioning members of the priest's church parish. He wasn't seen there since the day he reported the death threats to the local station. The obvious conclusion was that he disappeared after visiting it, since it happened after the evening service. So it happened either on his way home or at his flat, considering it was found open. Questioning his neighbours revealed that he probably didn't come home that day. One old lady even came to his door at around 9 in the evening to ask for some life advice, but no one opened. She didn't hear any suspicious sounds or see any suspicious people either. It seemed to be a complete dead end. All the local invalids were checked, just in case. Investigators really tried to somehow work that strange handprint angle. At first they started to check those who lived nearby, and after Chechnya and Afghanistan, there were many. By the end of it, the police checked almost all the town's invalids, but found no fingerprint matches. They didn't really expect any results at this point, so they just wrote it off to probable local cultists, which was really easy to do back then because of the story that happened when I was a child. Even those 2 guys that were caught 2 years ago were questioned, but to no avail. Maybe it was their friends doing it or something, but I doubt it, since modus operandi seemed too different. Of course, if the priest wasn't largely ignored when he came into the station, he probably could have told them something else. And that info might have resulted in a solved case. But we have what we have, and it really smells of some mysticism in my opinion. By the way, here's another photo of that place made at around 11 in the evening. Those little lights that I told you about in the beginning, zooming didn't result in anything, and the flash on my camera was so fucking bright that I got scared and decided to leave that place just in case I was seen. Not that I'm a coward, but, you know, that forest becomes really creepy when you know this story. The lights are around the place where the glaive is. Those are certainly not cigarette lights, too far away to be seen so clearly. Possibly small campfires of motorcycle lights, but there's no way to get a car here. It still remains a mystery. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and if you stayed this long, thank you. And also thank you just for coming back and listening to me after so long. And if you have your own stories that you want me to read, my submissions email is linked down below in the description. And write a comment. Helps the algorithm. Give me a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.